spazju l-historians, li jistudjaw il-classics, archivists li għadhom jibdew il-ħajja tagħhom professjonali spazju. U għamek illum għandna Skye Vassallo li hija Research Support Officer fl-Università ta' Malta fid-Dipartiment tal-Classics and Archaeology imma hija wkoll volontiera fl-Arkiv Nazzjonali ta' Malta. Kemm jien Skye? 5 snin. Aħna bħed nafu xulxin bħala volontiera hawnhekk. U llum ħadd għamlilna din taħdita fuq Latin Inscriptions. Enjoy it?
Thank you for the introduction, Danica. So, yes, I will be speaking today about a project called Corpus, Inscriptionum, Melitensium that is currently being headed by the Department of Classics and Archaeology. But before we go into it, first I'd like to ask you, as my audience, a couple of questions. So, what first comes to mind when you think of Latin inscriptions? Okay, Roman times. Religion, okay. History, yes.
Poder.
Poder, okay. Interesting. Let me move on to another question. Where have you encountered Latin inscriptions before? Do not look around you.
Churches, right?
Churches, yes.
Manuscripts, archives.
Okay.
In the streets.
Tombs, yes. Streets, yes. Yes. Very good, okay. And lastly, how many do you think you've come across? The ones you've really noticed, though, like. Difficult to come up with a number, right? So, the thing is, in Malta, we estimate that across the Maltese Islands there are thousands of Latin inscriptions. Definitely we don't notice these thousands of Latin inscriptions, though, but they're all around us. Unfortunately, they go unnoticed because we don't give them a second thought. Why? Because of the language barrier, usually. Most of us don't know Latin nowadays. And since we don't know Latin, we walk past them because we'll never be able to understand them. Now, because of this, we might not realize what kind of information we've just picked out of. It could be telling us about a very remarkable event that changed the history of Malta, or someone who himself changed the history of Malta, but we wouldn't know because we don't know the language. So we don't realize what we're missing by not being able to understand Latin inscriptions. Now that I've brought your attention to the matter, maybe you'll be walking through somewhere or even looking around the room here, and you get curious and think, I really want to understand what that says now. So you start paying attention to Latin inscriptions, and you get curious. But of course, they don't exactly come with subtitles, right? Like your favorite show on TV. But if you have a smartphone and an internet connection now, we have a bit of a solution for you. So, enter Corpus Inscriptionum Melitensium. What is Corpus Inscriptionum Melitensium? CIM for short, from Europe. So it is an online database that brings Latin inscriptions across Malta together into one online collection. It is funded by the University of Malta Research Excellence Fund, and it is being led by the Department of Classics and Archaeology at the University of Malta. So for each inscription that we have in the collection, you will find a transcription, translations into English and Maltese, and some background information, images, and even pinpoint location, but we'll get into this. We also include images of inscriptions from all sorts of places, so the streets, historical buildings, churches, you name it. We do not limit where these inscriptions come from. We also do not limit the time period that we're investigating. So there are inscriptions coming from the Roman period, there are inscriptions coming from as late as last year. We still include them. It is known that most Latin inscriptions come from the time of the Knights and even from the British, so that is a majority. However, we do not exclude the rest. Now, the database is being uploaded periodically by locality, and it is freely available. So, who is CIM for? So, CIM is for anyone who may want or need to learn about Latin inscriptions in any way, shape, or form. Perhaps you're a tourist in the streets of Malta for your first time, and you encounter a Latin inscription, and you want to know what it says. Or you're a historian who is looking into a new topic, and there is this one inscription that you think has your answer, but you're not sure how to tackle it. So, CIM has the solution for you. One thing I like to point out is there is no expertise needed to use it. It is just an online database. All you need is a Google search, essentially. And we also put it online and freely available because we want as many people as possible to be able to use it and to get inspired into using it and using it for their research. So, why do we need it? Because perhaps you might think, okay, Latin inscriptions, I'm sure there were studies done on these. Why do we need this particular corpus? So, our project, one of the main aims of it is to find an appreciation for Latin inscriptions. We think of these as Maltese cultural heritage, but they are sometimes not looked at. They can remind us about important events and people of Malta's past. They can teach us some lesser-known information that perhaps we wouldn't have thought about, and they can even reveal new information that may have not been documented. We're not sure until we study them. Another aspect of it is, as such, we also want to preserve the Latin inscriptions. Now, some of the inscriptions are slowly withering away due to weather conditions. There are multiple things that affect them. For example, from my own experience, I was once taking a look at an inscription in a text that I was studying. I went to look it up in real life in the location that it was supposed to be. It was no longer there, and this is probably because of urban development. So our project hopes to make sure that these inscriptions forever have a home, at least online. Further than that, we also note that there are temporary inscriptions. So these are inscriptions that were used for a very short period of time, for example, for an event. And these are only documented in, for example, archival resources. And we want to bring these to light so that they can be appreciated for the future. So how do we do it? There are actually many facets to this project, and it has allowed me to explore many different places and do many different things. That is a picture of myself in Zabuch taking a picture of an inscription. So, first of all, we do recognize that there are text sources that already have Latin inscriptions because studies have been done on Latin inscriptions. Usually they focus on, for instance, the Latin inscriptions in a parish church or in the sacristy of a parish church. They're quite specific and they have those kinds of details. Now, even though these have been done, an overall overarching corpus that exhausts Latin inscriptions in Malta has not been done. So we kind of want to aid that. But we do refer to studies that have already been done on Latin inscriptions. And they're very helpful because they help us usually kick off research for a particular location. Now, it cannot stop there though, because we also do on-site data gathering. So, as I mentioned here, so I go around and take pictures in different locations of Latin inscriptions. Sometimes it's like a treasure hunt. I'm just exploring the streets and I notice interesting things and I'll take a picture of the Latin inscription there. So after that comes the data processing. This is the interesting bit. So basically, I start by analyzing my images, I edit them without altering the information of the inscription, and I compare them to what I already have. We put them in the database, and we create new records for those that have not been documented yet, of course. Then I start by processing them, by transcribing them. We also do kind of different levels of this, so we copy the Latin exactly, but then you have to work on it to get to a translation, so there's interpretation there as well. And of course, we translate them to English and Maltese for accessibility purposes. Now, we also add some additional information where it's possible and where we can find it. This is to kind of give you a fuller picture as much as possible of those inscriptions. Every inscription has a story, not just the one it's saying in its words, but also how it came about. So, as such, in terms of background information, we give things like anything about the inscription, if we can find it, in terms of who made it, for example, or who paid for it. This is kind of scarce information, not always very easy to find. We also do try to give information about any names mentioned in the inscriptions or locations or events. We also try to include citations, so if the inscription was mentioned anywhere, we give a pinpoint location, so if you want to go and find it, you can find it yourself. And we also give a VIF ID and keywords, which mostly aid researchers. And then when our locality is completed, we upload it to the University of Malta drum repository. This is set up by the University Library, and you can find it for free over there. So, how is it going? So, as such, we've touched on about 800 inscriptions from different localities. Not all of them are published just yet. We're working on them, but we do have some of them that are published. For example, our Senglea collection is published, and also our MCDA campus one is published, because yes, there are Latin inscriptions on the MCDA campus as well. We do want to know that this is a work in progress project. There are so many inscriptions out there, and when you look into them, you just keep finding more. So this is very much a work in progress. But we've tackled places like Valletta, Bormla, Birgu, Zabuj Gozo, even Rabat. I've also started working on here as well. There are actually hundreds of inscriptions, about 100 inscriptions in the parish church here. So I would say this is practically a treasure trove. We also visited multiple sites with the help of many people who have shown interest in our project, so I would like to thank them from here, and we've consulted with experts too. We do try to reach out to the public as much as we can by giving public lectures such as this one. We also gave a public lecture just last year at the Jesuit Oratories about the inscriptions that are found there, a very interesting collection too. In terms of public engagement, we also are trying something new and involving the public in our research. How do we do this? Basically, we have asked the public to send us any inscriptions that they know about, that may be in places that are hard to reach, or maybe only they know about. and we would include them in our database. So we are making this database for the public, for the people, to be able to enjoy them. So any contributions are more than welcome. And we also are working a lot on promoting this project through social media. We have a Facebook page that we use to not only share updates on our project, but we like to share interesting inscriptions and their translations, and then interesting information that comes up throughout our research. Now, the future of CIM, what does the future hold for us? So, due to time constraints, it will not be possible, unfortunately, to include thousands of inscriptions across the Maltese Islands by the end of the duration of CIM. However, we do hope that this project will serve as a very solid foundation and resource for future research. We are looking into more funding opportunities, for instance, so that this research can continue. And we hope that not only does CIM continue to develop in the future in terms of both including more inscriptions and increasing accessibility and finding new ways to reach people, we also hope that CIM generates interest and awareness for Latin inscriptions, because that is the basis of what has gotten us to this project. So we want to be able to appreciate what it has. So I'd like to take you now through a couple of notable inscriptions. These are some of my favorites from the collection. So, a place that might not be the first place you think of to find Latin inscriptions is Busquet. In Busquet, there are 2 Latin inscriptions at the gates, right next to the car park. What is it not? Car park? I'm sure it was not a car park when the inscriptions were put there. And one of them, on the left side, I believe, is just this one. Now, here you can see a name, Agustina Randon. Now, Agustina Randon is a historical figure and a certain known one. We are still trying to decipher this inscription fully, but we have learned from it already that Randon was someone who was very, very interested in agriculture in Malta, and it seems that he has contributed significantly in supporting Maltese agriculture. So that's pretty interesting. Information on Randon is pretty scarce. We don't know that much about him, but we value the fact that through this inscription we can learn more about him. I am sure that many people have passed by this inscription in Busquet and not noticed that it was perhaps someone who has contributed greatly to what it is today. Now, I earlier mentioned that there was an inscription that went up just last year. This is it. So, this is the Canola Francisca bell that is now at St. John's Co-Cathedral in Valletta. It was inaugurated in the year of the Jubilee 2025, and the Latin on it is composed by Mr. Anthony John. Something interesting that I would like to point out is particularly this inscription over here. Now, that inscription reads Eis Boots Astensis in Batavian Ferit. So it means Eis Boots of Asten constructed me in the Netherlands. It is essentially just telling us where the bell was constructed. However, this is an interesting tidbit that is one of my favorite things about this project. I've seen other bells in Malta having a similarly constructed Latin line inscribed on them. And to me, it seems to give a voice to the bell because the bell is kind of saying they made me in the Netherlands. So that's just something I find really interesting about this kind of usage of Latin. And other bells that I've seen use this kind of inscription are mostly over 100 years old. This one is just from last year. So the fact that that tradition has kind of kept on until very recently is significant. We have another famous landmark here now. I'm not sure if you've ever noticed that there's an inscription on it. This is the Guardiola, very famous landmark in St. Cloud. It is of course overlooking the harbour, and the inscription does have to do with the fact that it is overlooking the harbour. The inscription reads, Portubus hic tribus, una et pluribus arquebus adstans, dum in vigilo ex cubiis omniatum tamanet, and then there's the date. And this translates to, I am standing here with 3 harbours and a great deal of fortifications. As I watch over with the guards, all remains safe. 1692. Once again, we see that the watchtower is given a voice. The watchtower itself is saying, as long as I am here, everything will be fine. Malta will not be invaded, essentially. And that is just something that has remained for such a long time in such an iconic part of the Maltese landscape, because this is one of the most noticeable and most recognizable constructs in Malta. So, one last thing. I would like to let you know that if you're interested in learning more about Latin inscriptions, we do have a conference coming up on the 20th of April, so just not next week, but the one after. It's called Latinitas in Perpetuum, the value of Latin inscriptions to history, culture, and tourism. So we want to show basically that Latin inscriptions should not only be valued as historical objects, they should be valued as historical objects, that is our belief for sure, but also that they should be treated as such. So they should be admired as attractions, they have the potential for it, as much as anything in a museum. And that is one of the aspects that we wish to bring out in this conference. So we have quite a jam-packed program here. We have people speaking about the historical aspects of the inscriptions and focusing on particular inscriptions. And then we also have people who will be talking about what they're doing with inscriptions, creating tours, creating games even. So this is kind of, we want to show that Latin inscriptions can be appreciated from all sorts of angles, and that we can use them and they have more potential than just being slabs on a wall that we walk past. Okay, so thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
I noticed that. Is that the old Latin, sort of?
That is stylistic. Yes, you find most inscriptions written as a V.
As a V.
Usually when we're studying we use a U, but that's to help us understand better. Most inscriptions, yes, they will have a V.
The V.
Although recent ones they use a U.
The U.
So it kind of usually indicates time period, but it's stylistic as well. That's what I observed.
I have one question. Have you visited cemeteries?
Not yet, but we plan to. They are part of our of what we want to do. There are hundreds of tombstones there, and I'm sure some of them are in Latin. So